Hi, this is Dr. Mike, and this is our Tuesday lecture for ethics for the Vet Tech class at Valley College in Cleveland. Good to see you this morning. And again, I'm sorry that I can't be here in person because I'm in day 2 of my uh, intensive for my PhD. I had to give up paper yesterday, and it's quite harrowing. It's one thing to teach and have students, it's another thing to sit around with people working on a PhD and try to give a paper that means something to them as well. Quite a different thing. 25-page papers are kind of the normal in that class setting. So, if you have any aspirations of a PhD, then that's kind of what you will buy in for, and it's a long, arduous process. But anyways, I appreciate your attention to detail. Appreciate you finishing your class yesterday and emailing me when you were done, letting me know so I could record attendance. I ask you to do that again today. If you would just send me an email. I hope you're meeting at the same time that we normally meet and listening to the lecture, and then working on your stuff through the day and trying to get that done. So I encourage you to continue to do that as we move forward through the week, and then we'll be back together on next Monday for our final wrap up and get things done for the final week. If you have any questions or needs or problems, please let me know. I will be available by email and will be available by text. I will not be available for a phone call this week, but I will get back to you when I get a break, and we'll solve any problems that we can, and we'll take care of. There's not, as long as I know about it, there's really not any problem we can't take care of. And so, let me encourage you to communicate freely, just like we always do. And I know that you'll be fine. Yesterday, we talked about natural law and about human rights and things that we think are conducive for everybody on the planet, that all people are equal. And we know that we've had, even in this country, recently we've had challenges to those kind of ideas, and battles with civil rights and rights of people in different people groups are always seem to be at issue. You would think in a country that has as much freedom as we do, and we're not perfect. No country on the planet is perfect. If you find one, go join it. But you don't see people trying to escape from America. You see people trying to escape to get into America. So that should say something to you about at least the benefits we have that we can appreciate and we can enjoy. And so these natural rights we would love to extend to everybody on the planet. And as I've said, we're not perfect, and we have issues within our own country that we work on and that we're constantly working on. And at least we have a rule of law that helps us to be able to do that. You've seen what happened in Haiti last week with the assassination of their president and the chaos that ensued. And we learned lessons from that, we don't want to go there. We don't want January the 6th to be our normal. That was not our normal. It surprised the world, actually. And they're still talking about it. We're still talking about it. We're still analyzing that. But the danger is that once you tip over into anarchy, how do you bring it back to a place of understanding and quiet and the rule of law? Once you disadvantage and once you disparage uh, the police and our lawmakers, and we know they're not perfect, far, far from perfect. They make mistakes, and some of them are just outright do things on purpose to be evil. We have to remove those people and we have to replace them. We can't remove them and have nothing, or we'll be back in the hunters and gatherers stage of civilization. In order to live together and work together, we have to have laws and we have to have the rule of law in order to do that. But then beyond that, when you are intentionally treading upon people and the rights of others, then we do need international law, just like our federal law sometimes has to supersede the laws of the state when they refuse to make changes to give freedom to everybody, such as in civil rights. Had we not had federal civil rights legislation which mandated civil rights law to every state, places like my home state of South Carolina or Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia or Arkansas, Louisiana, all those southern states that are so dyed in wool and have such problems with racism would never have changed, and we'd still had slavery. So you see the federal government serves a very viable function in mandating certain things for the good of everybody so that people's rights will not be violated. We currently in the middle of the LGBTQ community trying to do the same things. You have to work these things out on the ground. It started with civil rights and with Native American rights and with women's rights and LGBTQ rights. All these things have to be worked out, and sometimes they have to be fought for in order to gain and win the right to live in peace and do what you need to do. So basically, if you have any questions or thoughts on those things, I would love to hear them and entertain them, and we can discuss them. Today, I want to talk about virtues. We talked about ethics, and last week you turned in your ethics paper. This week, we're going to talk about virtues, and basically, when we think of that, we think of the things that make a person what they are, the good character that they are, the person that wants to go and do things for the good of the many. Pat Tillman, your book talks about him, who was a star football player who went into the war in Iraq, ended up being killed and becoming a hero, but he wanted to do that. He felt that was his duty to go and defend his country and to join in a war that that the country was fighting. So there are a lot of people that and everybody hopefully has some virtues. We'll talk about different things as we go through this lesson this morning that were viable. You look back at your grandparents, you look at your parents, and you realize there were certain things about them that made them a great example that you wanted to emulate and you wanted to copy and you wanted to be like. And so, the same thing was true in my own life with my parents. My dad was a very hardworking man. He worked 15 hours a day in the woods cutting trees. I didn't enjoy that kind of work. I went with him from the time I was big enough in the summers to walk behind a tractor and hook and unhook logs. And he tried to teach me the work ethic that he had. And I got the work ethic. I just didn't enjoy the work he did. And my dad probably never was really happy with me because I didn't follow in his footsteps. My middle brother enjoyed that kind of work much more than I did. And my baby brother was like me. He hated it with a passion. And, I made the Lord a promise if he'd get me out of the woods, I'd stay out of the woods. And he kept his part of the promise, and I've kept mine so far. But my dad loved work, and he was honest, and he was, always giving and trying to help somebody. And so those are the virtues that he had that made him the man that he was. When he passed away, we received friends for 4 hours at the funeral home from 6 to 10. And at 10 o'clock that night, we turned away over 300 people waiting to get into the funeral home. My dad was a country guy who, had I not dragged him, would never have gotten out of the county that he was born in. So it wasn't that he had education. He had seventh grade education. He never had a big job, never made lots of money, but he was just a giving person. And people came through the line that night over and over again and said, my children would have starved to death had your dad not brought us stuff from his garden, or my children would have frozen to death had your dad not cut us firewood and brought firewood to us. So over and over, we heard that resounded over and over. And we got to the church the next day for the funeral. The church was full, and people were standing, probably 100 people out in the parking lot that couldn't get in. And the church was full, the porch was full, down the steps and out into the parking lot. But you know what? To be remembered like that, you have to have some virtues and some good things. They don't do that for people that are not nice or not good people. So basically, that's kind of what we're talking about today. And you have people in your own life that's very similar to that, your grandparents or your parents, or maybe it's somebody special otherwise that holds you up to a higher standard and makes you want to participate in ways that would bring honor to them and bring respect to your family. And that's kind of the thing that we want to talk about today. Give me just a moment while I transition to our screen to look at our slides this morning for this study. And I hope today that you will read this chapter, and I hope that you will share some things from it that you find to be of importance. So virtue ethics is a topic for the day, and this is what we want to talk about. And these are basically character traits: honesty, courage, kindness, generosity, loyalty. All those are known as virtues. And virtue ethics tends to concentrate on those traits of character, those habits, those tendencies, those dispositions that make a person good. What do you think makes a good person? That's a great question to ask yourself today. And if you were live in class, I'd ask you to respond to that. I've tried to respond based on my own life. What does it take to make a person a good person? Virtues push us to be what we ought to be rather than what we ought to do. It's not about doing necessarily. We do because we are. And that's a very important point that we ought to think about. You will never be, you'll never do more than what's inside of you. And I've often said to parents, your children will never be any more honest than you are because you're the role model. They'll never be any more courageous or kind or generous or loyal than you are because you will never lead them any deeper than you are yourself. And I've seen that happen so many times through the years where parents would have children and the children would be as not good as their parents were, as sorry, to use a country phrase, as their parents were. But virtues ought to push us to be more, to be deeper, to think about all these things. Virtues allow us to express our highest potential. The thing that you'll be remembered for when you leave this world will not be how much money you made or what kind of house you lived in or what kind of car you drove, but what kind of person you are. That was your highest potential. So the virtuous life or the moral life focuses on this excellence of character. And the Greeks started out with this with Aristotle back in the day. Excellence, arete was the Greek word, stressing the notion of virtue and of ethics. That goes all the way back to 384 to 322 BCE or before the Common Era. There are intellectual virtues, excellences of mind, the ability to judge and to reason well would be a great virtue. That's something that probably our parents would call common sense, that you're able to think through a certain circumstance or situation and come up with a good response, the correct response. There are also moral virtues that dispose us to act well. You went through and made your list of your ethical standards last week. Those are your guiding principles. Those are the bottom line. Those are where you draw the line. You're not going to pass over these. You're not going to move beyond them. These are where you stand. As Martin Luther said when he stood before the council defending himself, when he brought about the Protestant Reformation, he said, "Here I stand. I can do no other. This is as far as I can go. And I want you to know that these are the issues that I have." So Aristotle talked a lot about what he called the golden mean, or virtue as an average between extremes. The Buddhists would call this the middle way. How do you get through? We don't want to be on one extreme to the other. You don't want to be on the extreme of being extremely too far in one direction or the other direction, but you want to find the middle way. As my dad used to say about driving, keep it between the ditches, basically. And we have to do that in our own life. You don't want to be, extremely mean, or you can be so good that you don't stand up for anything and you just let people walk over you. You can't be there either. So you need to find that middle line in the road and stay as close to that as you can. We talk about 4 basic or cardinal virtues that are essential. One of those is prudence or wisdom. Sadly, this virtue probably doesn't come too often without the experience. I've told you about the class with philosophy that when I was an 18-year-old, I didn't get as much out of the class as I probably should have because it did not mean as much to me as it does when I went back at 50 and redid this again. There's something about the quality of age and wisdom that really improves your virtues as you grow older. People grow to respect you. It's amazing with your children. I've often said that, it amazes me the number of times that I open my mouth and hear my mother's voice coming out of my mouth. When I was a teenager, I didn't appreciate the fact that my mother was always trying to tell me what to do or make me do something that was right. But when I got older, I realized the virtue of that, the prudence, the wisdom of being honest, of being truthful, of being, doing what you're supposed to do, fulfilling your duties. And it goes down now in me to the, very small things. I'm always trying to be thankful and show gratitude. That was one of the things my mother always impressed upon us. That is a a virtue to be thankful, and to kind of look up sometimes and see where the acorns fall. Don't just eat the acorns without ever being thankful for where they come from. The other thing would be justice. These are things that we can all get behind. It is not a black-white issue. It is a human issue. And as a human issue, we ought to stand up for justice. When a policeman does what was done to the man in Minneapolis and put his knee on his throat and suffocated him and killed him, that ought to infuriate every one of us, no matter what our race or our skin color. That is a human issue. It is a man who has no virtue and no ethics, who has this mindset that he's in control and he can do anything he wants to do. Those are dangerous people, and we don't need them in our police force. We don't need them in our military. We don't need them in our neighborhood. They need to be put away somewhere, because that is not the thing that we need as a society. Or maybe we send them out to live on their own. I think there should be such a thing as expelling people from society when they are so bad and so evil and so wicked they can't even get along with people to live together. Then maybe they ought to live separately. The British used to do that with their rapists and murderers. They took them to Australia and dumped them on that barren island, and they had to fend for themselves and live with each other. And they also did their debtors' prison. They dumped them in Georgia, and those people didn't even know how to plant a pea, and they all died and left a bunch of orphans. And that's how John Wesley, the preacher, and George Whitefield, the preacher, came here, started the Great Awakening. They came here to start an orphanage for the children in Georgia that were left alone. But justice ought to be high on our list of things that we need to be doing. Temperance is another thing. It's funny, things like alcohol and drugs and things like that. We realize that not all drinking is necessarily wrong. I mean, you can take a drink, have a beer, socially drink, but it takes temperance. And the temperance movement in bygone years was totally anti-alcohol. Drugs the same way. There are drugs you can take under a doctor's orders that will help you, but then taking illicit drugs or illegal drugs will not help you in the long run. And so you need to find, one of those things is that you learn temperance. Now, it's not just drugs and alcohol. Eating could be considered one of those things, that you eat in moderation and not overeat. And as you know, most Americans are obese as it is. So temperance would be one of those things. And then courage, the courage to, join the Army, as Pat Tillman did, or in our case, to get up every morning. As you get older, you got aches and pains and all kind of things that hinder you from getting up and getting out and doing what you need to do. But sometimes you just have to get up in courage and do those things to get moving. Aristotle's worldview was that there's an inherent order in nature. He probably would not have looked at that as being God as we would understand it. They had many gods. But he also looked at it from the standpoint that the ultimate good of humans should be happiness, should be blessedness, should be prosperity. Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, said that we are, as human beings, it is our right to have life, liberty, and be able to pursue happiness. So basically, to function as human beings, we need to use knowledge and wisdom and be rational. It's peculiar. Rationalism or rationality is peculiar to human beings. You don't find that in animals. But we have to live according to rational thought with knowledge, and knowledge should guide our choice and our actions. And we see that so well with the COVID vaccine today. So many people aren't following rational thought and endangering their lives and the lives of their family, and sometimes even pastors endangering the lives of his congregation when they say to them such things that, well, they're putting a chip in your arm and they're going to be able to track you, and this is the mark of the beast, and if you take this vaccine, you can't go to heaven. Those kind of things are irrational. We have the science, and we need to follow the science. That is the guide. That's the guide of our choice and action, and it's our knowledge. Education it will change you tremendously in how you look at the world. And we have to develop the ability to know the world and to know the truth. And truth in the last 4 years has really suffered in that when you tell lies long enough and people begin to believe them, then you have distorted the truth and you've destroyed the sources of truth, so that now nobody knows who to believe or what to believe. That was the overt attempt in the last 4 years, is to destroy any kind of source of truth that would help people to understand things. And so that we see, that's one of the problems that we have now. Across the cultures, you and I normally just talk about Westerners, but across the cultures, there are also other virtue ethics that are talked about, especially in the Asian world. Confucius, who is probably their most well-known philosopher, was a part of the Chinese tradition, and he believed that there were different virtues for each role, that whatever role you fulfilled in life, it's very much like a skill set in his mind, that you have certain skills that will lead you to be in the role that you're in the world, and you need to work those skills and you need to show them, and so there's specific purposes for that. Hinduism believe there are 5 moral virtues. Buddhism and Christianity share some of the same. But Buddhism also believes what we talked about with the middle way, that you find the middle way through a problem without being extreme on one side or the other. As far as contemporary philosophy, today lots of people talk about virtue being corrective. It helps us to perform very difficult tasks. We fall back on our virtues as a way of doing what we need to do. One of the questions we ask when we study these things is, are there universally valuable traits? How are they demonstrated? Is there really a distinct type of ethics? And you'll get a little taste of Immanuel Kant in this chapter, where he says there is no golden mean. Some traits are praiseworthy, others are wrong. So there's no middle ground where everything in that category would be considered virtuous. And then what do they say about us as human beings? Those are all interesting. Aristotle talked about the nature of the good. That's what everything is aimed for. That we're trying to do good. We're trying to do the best that we can do. We want to be happy. We want to do well. There are things that hinder that. When we go back to think about temperance, people that overdrink or abuse drugs are not. They think that's a happiness. They think they are doing something that will make them happy, when in the end it will destroy their means and their level of living. So basically, as a human being, then we want to do things in accordance with reason, and reason is so important when we think about intellectual and moral virtues, and that this thing of excess can cause us more trouble than we think about. Eating to excess can cause you health problems. Drinking to excess can cause health problems and a lot of other things, family problems and work problems. So basically, when you think about virtues, we think about things that are our guiding principles, and it's always seems to be against the flesh. I mean, if you have a virtue of timeliness and a work ethic, why then is it so difficult to get up in the morning and get to work by 8 o'clock? Because your body wants to work in opposition to you and go in exactly the opposite direction. So hopefully, as you read through this chapter today, then you will find some things here that will kind of resonate as we've talked about them in your own life. I encourage you to read the chapter. It's a great background to what you're writing and talking about. You're writing this week about virtues, and so don't forget to try to get something in the first discussion board in or posted by Wednesday, so that your classmates will have it to read and they can respond to it, and try to have something in by Friday so they can do the second one. And of course, these are not deadlines. They're just great suggestions to help you. We're in a small class, and so it's easier in a small class if people will be a little bit more proactive and get their things in early, like discussion boards before Sunday night. And I encourage you also to work on things through the week, and don't wait till Sunday night, because you can't do your best work under that kind of time pressure. And if technology fails, it's going to fail at 10 o'clock on Sunday night when you've got something due at 12. So let me encourage you to do that. Well, have a great day. I hope I'm going to have a great day in this second day of my intensive. That is a great word, by the way. You don't know what intensive means till you take a PhD class with 30 other people that are doing the same thing, and 2 teachers, and giving papers and listening and asking questions and discussing. All those things are very much a part of the journey. And I'm looking forward to this. Will be my 10th degree, and I am retiring after I get this one finished. I don't think I'm doing another one. And I've been in school for, as you know, 56 out of 63 years. And it's time to retire from going to school, even though it's good for your brain and keeps you functioning. But I want you to know I appreciate you. I miss you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.